the fitness industry, which is slowly morphing into a self-help type industry. And I do this myself. We love to talk about habits and behaviors, and it's being a lifestyle change, which it is, of course. But at the same time, there is a biological aspect to this in terms of what breeds a result, how you maintain that result, what's happening physiologically to your body. It does go beyond just the decisions you're making, which also have a physiological aspect to them as well.
We are going down a mindset life coaching route now, and I just think when we look at that, we almost are forgetting what our job is. Our job is to be coaches. Our job isn't to sort out your mental health, isn't to cure your ADHD, it isn't to solve your marriage problems, it isn't telling you all the benefits of an ice bath. It's to get you stronger, it's to take some body fat off you, it's to put on some tissue. So we're both relatively old heads in the fitness industry now, and I think there's a bit of a trend now when it comes to people talking about Charles Poliquin. We either have half of the people of the new fitness market that have never heard of Charles, which makes you feel very, very, very old, and half of the group that feels it's fashionable to bash Charles. And a lot of my experience and my knowledge in the fitness industry has come from this incredible coach, and I'm sure a lot of yours has. So I just wanted to kind of use this show to break down whether he was a evil genius or overhyped and a bit of a clown. All of this is said with love. Like, may he rest in peace, one of the best influences on me in the world. And I will give you a bit of a spoiler. I think this show is going to be overwhelmingly positive about the man. But let's break down some of the things. So, let's look at this. For people who don't know who Charles Poliquin is, Rob, give us an overview of Charles Poliquin and how you first came to know about Charles.
The definition I would use, which seems to be used on most articles referring to him, is renowned strength coach. Even articles that are kind of negative about him still use that term, renowned. Ahead of his time, some might say. I would have said he was highly respectable, meticulous in his methods and his approach, and he was just one of those, and this is why he's a controversial figure, he's one of those that was willing to push to the next level, maybe even push things a little bit too far. How he formed his beliefs, I don't think it was off of any incessant need to make money or reputation. I think he honestly did what he believed would work the best for the people he was working with at that moment in time. I came to his my awareness of his methods came from when I was trying to find the best stuff for my Olympic weightlifting athletes. And I came across some things of him online. And again, this was way before the social media storm that we have today. You actually had to type things in to find what you was looking for and watch videos and read articles. And stuff he said made sense. And we used some of his methods and some of his approaches. And for me personally, he's probably the white rabbit that led me down the supplementation rabbit holes that I go down. And then through following his stuff for a little bit, I then came into this world of body transformations, which is where you can take over this part of the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said a number of cool things there, and it's particularly about Charles being meticulous in his approach. And I think, and I don't, this may have been overtaken now, but for a huge period of time, certainly when I was following him when he was alive, he put more people on podiums at Olympic Games than any strength coach in history. Like, you can sit there and talk about whether some of his methods were more sales tactics or outdated or disproven, but the guy got results. And if you look at anyone that has learned from Charles, like, look at the people in the industry right now that have learned from Charles, right? From Carlos Castro to Andre Benoit to Luke Lehman to Ryan Fennell. You know, these people are incredible. So Stefan Cazalt, right? Incredible strength coaches that have all learned their trade, developed their trade from a foundation that Charles provided them and a platform that Charles provided them. And I think there's a lot you can say about this character. All of those guys are meticulous. All of those guys, I did a consult with Carlos recently because I knew that he would be really good at understanding how to plan and periodize strength progressions, knowing where someone's going to be, knowing how to test and retest. There was nothing left to chance. So while we can look at some of these things and going, okay, in theory, 20 years of hindsight, are some of these things accurate or not? Maybe, maybe not. But we know that science is about 17, 18 years, the research behind where things actually are. Because it takes time to get things properly approved through studies. And he was willing to test and willing to push the boundaries. And he got his own data from these things. And it's because of that approach that's now gone on to so many phenomenal coaches. But I think that talks a lot about the character of the human being. Like, I remember hearing old stories about Charles that he started learning about strength coaching when he wanted to get out of church. And he found the library that was just down the road or upstairs from where his church was. And he's like, well, he's looking at busting off dusty books. And of course, he finds like a sort of like a strength training and sort of kinesiology textbook. But the thing that amazed me is that this book was in English. And Charles is a Canadian French speaker. He didn't know any English. And now in a world where 34 seconds is too long on a TikTok reel, this guy went, well, I need to learn English. There wasn't, oh, this book's not for me and put it down. He's like, well, first barrier, going to need to learn English. And this is a level of work ethic, determination, just head down and getting the work done, whether it's hard or not. I think a lot of people can take a lot from. I think he'd never say discipline because he wrote a book called The Myth of Discipline because he loved what he did. But the passion and the drive, I think, is unmatched.
Geezer never stopped. Once he started, he never stopped. You could probably write a biography of Poliquin and it would be very, very similar to Total Recall, Arnie's biography, without the Hollywood parts, right? And competing on stage. It would be very, very similar in terms of look how far he pushed. And he didn't stop, didn't rest, seemed to rest at any point. Continuously pushed, continuously grew his network, teach people, continued coaching, stayed in the field. And as many wild claims, if you want to use that term, as he may have made, I don't think he said anything that he wasn't putting into practice either himself or with someone. I don't think he ever made a claim that wasn't rooted in methods he was utilizing at that time.
Yes. No, I absolutely not. The guy absolutely lived by his message. Tenfold. I think I think a lot of people can take a lot from the man that Charles was and the drive that he had. And like you've never done a seminar with Charles directly.
No.
Like he had a presence for a man that wasn't very tall in height. But it's interesting you mentioned Arnie, because Arnie was his initial inspiration. He just preferred the performance side than he did the bodybuilding side. But Arnie was the initial thing that made him get into the gym and train. So it's an interesting parallel to take that you probably learned a lot from Arnie and his drive and his, like, it could be Arnie that inspired him to have that work ethic. But I remember doing, there was two kinds of seminars with Charles towards the end of his career. And they were either the most blown away, amazing courses you ever did, which unfortunately I never did. And there was the Charles who kind of was a bit tuned out and just wanted to tell stories. And I got that one. And while maybe not as good for my education, it was one of the most fun weekends I ever had in terms of learning. I went across to the gym. At the time was UP Marbella, which is now Elements. Shout out to Elliot Upton. And we hosted Bioprint, so the follow-up to Biosignature. And he was just wanting to tell stories there. You can tell he just wasn't that interested in it. And the start of the week, there's a few stories I remember from this. The start of the week, he would grab people caliper readings, right? He would grab them with his hands and go 36, and lo and behold, Carlos went and measured it to be 36. And that sounds incredible. Obviously, he created them, but be able to know from a feel that much was unbelievable. And then as the weekend got on and he clearly got more zoned out, he just to grab someone's hamstring and just go, fat. And I'd love to see the response to Charles if he was alive today, because he wasn't an incredible man, but he wasn't a politically correct man. He wasn't and I say this with genuine respect, wasn't a nice man. He told you what needed to hear, not what you wanted to hear, and he held you to the standards he held himself. So if your umbilical was too big, he would tell you were too fat. And he would tell you what to do to get yourself back in a better condition. But I also remember him, like, in between, like, lectures in the seminar, he'd just go and have a sleep on the middle of the gym floor, like, literally lying down in the middle of the gym floor, and often coming back into the seminar 5 minutes late, telling a story about these crazy Bulgarian female weightlifters that he trained that were stronger than all the blokes. And then we did a little bit of learning, and then he'd tell some more stories. But, like, the man had a phenomenal life, and he was a once-in-a-lifetime strength coach with the biggest bicep peaks you'll have ever seen in your life. Like, crazy in terms of arms. But, like, when it comes to the body composition stuff, again, my first sort of experience with that was when I started working for UP, and there was a massive influence. Like, there's so many people now think it's fashionable to bash Charles, yet every personal training studio top end in the world has a Charles element to it. Why are they all kitted out with Atlantis? Why do people do calipers? Why do people do German body composition training? Like, you might not know it, but Charles has a massive influence to the coaches, listeners, what you are doing right now.
Something as simple as GVT as well. Like, how many programs you may not even realise were Charles influenced as well, because of who he was mixing with at the time, because of who he educated that went on to create things themselves.
100%. 100%. So, like, going into this, why, like, actually, before we go into some of the things and say our opinions on a few of Charles's training programs, methods, products, why do you think it's become almost popular to bash the guy?
Because we like targeting popular yet controversial figures that will say something different to the approaches that we might say ourselves. I don't want to hold him to the same standard as this, but we spoke about this with Liver King, right? In some respect, there's a little bit of merit to a, high meat-based diet, not raw meat, but high meat-based diet. And some of the ancestral tenets that we went through, there's merit in there, right? But he was, the difference is Poliquin made some wild claims. Liver King was just a sham. That's the difference, right? So it doesn't mean there wasn't merit to some things of what he was saying. But again, it becomes, you rarely criticise from someone ahead of you, right? It's the people underneath. So I think the people underneath who were doing the loudest criticisms need to take a look at why they're doing that. Before we came on, I was looking up what negative stuff can I find online. A lot of it's been deleted, and I'm assuming deleted since his death. I'm assuming. Big, and yeah, fair enough. But then you also, the internet always remembers. You can't delete everything you've ever said in your past based on how someone might look at it now. You could just take ownership and explain, right? But it just always seemed to be articles titled An Objective Look At, and there was nothing objective about it. It was all personal attack, personal opinion, and words and phrases that did not need to be in these articles. It wasn't an objective look at all. And some of them poorly referenced and some not referenced at all, which just kind of highlights what's going on there. It's like, Poliquin's up there. I need to get my name out there. I disagree with this, so I'm going to shout loudest about this thing here, which I think is even easier to do now. If he was still alive, so much easier to do now because people's attention spans have gone down. You just need a sexy hook rather than writing out an entire article where, your dick's out on the table a little bit more when you're doing that.
Yeah, I look at this and I think if there's an element of that, there's tall poppy syndrome. And there is this thing of now people wanting to bring down people that are ahead of them. And we are in a world where we are looking at clickbaits, we're looking at titles. And I've been on business mentorships where they say, right, put one thing you agree with and then have two things you adamantly disagree with, and that's going to be the forefront of your marketing. And I like the fact that this show has been very shout-out orientated. All of us stand on the shoulders of giants that have helped us out. And I think now it's more popular than ever to just bash things. And I also think there's a part of the industry as it gets more popular that is pushing the boundaries and getting better and better and better and better and better. But I also think there is an element now of the rise of business coaches, which have helped people make money, and good coaches like help more people, but has also helped a lot of people who just go, how can I systemize and streamline my work so I have to do as little work as possible whilst making as much money as possible? And now you have people just going, well, you don't want to help people train hard because it's not easy. We're going to template this. We're going to template that. We're just going to say calorie deficit. That's all that matters, right? We're just going to give macros and just hope the client can just follow it. So if your whole knowledge base, if you're not willing to admit that some of these things may or may not work, if you're immediately bashing, that just means you don't want to delve into finding out, okay, where there's smoke, there's fire. And I'm not saying that all of the science panned out the way Charles thought it was, but there was a reason why he was doing these things. And there was probably some level of truth to it. And if you have your mind open enough to explore some of these things, you'll be amazed at the answers. But most people, it's too much hard work to study it. And it's almost too much hard work to, like, how many times have you seen this, right, on business mentorships? Hey, I've got a client asking for meal plans. How can I tell them I don't do that because it's going to take too long to write it? I'm like, it takes me like 5-10 minutes to write a meal plan. Like, what are you, like, that's the effort. And this is it. Like, the stuff that Charles talks about required a more meticulous approach, which takes more effort on the coach. And so many coaches don't have the drive to actually take the time to help their clients. And that's my biggest bugbear. Like, a lot of people are bashing him. It's because they're too lazy to find out what's right and what's wrong.
And it
So they go
depends
for the simplistic approach.
how far you're willing to take it as well, right? There's a small percentage of people that are all in, 100% all in. There's a percentage of people that are all or nothing, and they can stop and start all the flipping time. And there's a percentage of people that will just do 70 to 80% of what's required and still eventually get a result. That's the people who do. But the thing is, when you've got people like Poliquin who are 100%, they will do all the things that might only get you a 0.5 to 1% better result. And take it out of this mindset sphere of you just need to be 1% better than you were yesterday. You need to be way, way, well better than 1% than you were yesterday. The 0.5 to the 1% is not going to matter to the person who only needs to be doing 70 to 80% right across the course of the week to see the result that they want to see, which is probably over a longer period of time. But as we've seen with clients and trainers and other coaches, those people who it requires a 100%, you will do everything, right? You will do absolutely everything. And I think from my perspective, from my personal opinion, a lot of the things that whilst might now be grounded in, we don't actually need to do that. Okay, maybe not for the 70 to 80%ers, but what about those 100% people? Maybe there's still efficacy in a lot of the things that he said. I don't know. That's my opinion of it.
Is there a belief aspect there with coaches and potential clients though? Like this potentially veers off on a big tangent, but that people have only dieted by smashing their calories, doing if it fits your macros, and you don't know what's potential if they dial things in right. Because if anyone listening to this who's just a macros-based coach saying it's just the calories in versus calories out that matter, which yes, that is the fundamental. But are you telling me that improving nutrient density? Are you telling me that making sure that there's no deficiencies? Are you making sure that everything's good on your blood work? If you're making sure that your inflammatory status is low, you telling me that's not going to get a better result when it comes to building tissue and getting a recomp? And I have seen people, and you can say all you like about the amount of people Charles trained that may or may not been using extracurriculars, and I don't want to say that they were because some of these were athletes, right? This is not my place, I do not know. But whether you think they were or whether you think they weren't, I have seen enough people naturally create crazy recomps, myself included, by being the people willing to do this. Yet now we often see, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, right? How many online transformations do you see when no one has a chest at the end of it? Because like you look at their before and afters and they all finish at like 50 kilos, guys, right?
Yeah.
And like, the art of a body transformation rather than just a weight loss program, I think are few and far between now. And I think maybe going back, because things do full circle, right? Going back and taking, maybe not everything, but some of the stuff that Charles said could actually tenfold improve some of the results of the coaches around the world today by just plugging the gaps. You keep your calorie targets where they are, and now let's work on fine-tuning those diets. I reckon people will be surprised about the results they are leaving on the table.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And being able to maintain that result afterwards as well. Like with the fitness industry, which is slowly morphing into a self-help type industry. And I do this myself. We love to talk about habits and behaviors, and it's being a lifestyle change, which it is, of course. But at the same time, there is a biological aspect to this in terms of what breeds a result, how you maintain that result, what's happening physiologically to your body it does go beyond just the decisions you're making, which also have a physiological aspect to them as well. So it's a case of, again, like I'll go back to that. These are the 100, man, if the percenter term has been so morphed anyway, whether it's the 1%ers or the 10, 100%, these are the people that will go 100%, leave absolutely nothing on the table, nothing to chance, will do the things that they may not necessarily need to do for that chance to get that 0.5 to 1% extra to make it a 100% thing. And I think the difference is what you see. What's the end result there? It's okay, yeah, calories in, calories out, of course. Nutrient density, very, very, very important. Secondary after that. And then the things after that, so many people just leave it now. It doesn't matter. Like you look at the Eric Helms pyramid, which I think is important for most people out there. But the people that need a little bit more of that need an actual transformation or are trying to get to the next level with their sport, they need to go that little bit further than the rest of us do. In which case, supplementation probably even more important there. Timing, definitely important. So it's so easy to look at people that are going that extra mile and say, it's crazy, it doesn't need to be doing this stuff. We do that in all the realms. We're doing that now with Elon Musk. We're looking at the people who are ready to push through to the next realm and test things out and be willing to, I think they are willing to be ridiculed as well. I think that's just part and parcel of it. Like you said it perfectly, no smoke without fire, right? So we're going off on one. We're going to go on a lot of tangents today, I feel, as well.
Yeah, and I think when you look at some of these things, like people say that protein and calories are all that matters, and your carbs and fats can go up or down. Now, while I appreciate that that's from a weight loss perspective, that is absolutely true, I'm very big on coaches having sound principles first before thinking sound bites or before thinking of evidence-based. Nice. Now, we all should be evidence-based. And actually, I'm gonna correct that. I'm going to steal the term from Luke Lehman. We shouldn't be evidence-based. We should be evidence-informed. But we need sound principles because us going, right, research says that people lost the same amount of weight if they did high carb or high fat. All right, cool. But at the same time, if you don't think, like glycolysis and beta oxidation aren't going to have different responses to your body, you're not looking deep enough. Like having a high fat, low carb diet is going to have a different response. And like if you look at the benefits of a high fat, low carbohydrate diet with insulin levels low. So essentially, let's say we have blood glucose goes up, insulin puts it in the liver, the muscles, and then this got what I call the emergency car park of fat stores. You have to deplete those other two. That's why people end up looking skinnier on a diet, right? To get into this muscle storage zone, fat storage zone, and start emptying sort of triglycerides for glycerol to be used for fuel sources. Now, like that will will be harder to do if insulin is always high. But on the flip side, insulin can calm the nervous system down, put us at rest so we can start using fat as a fuel source. Can it be protein sparing and can build some tissue? So like, I'm not saying either of those are good or bad, but I tell you what, there is a time and a place for lower carbohydrate dieting. There's a time and a place for higher carbohydrate dieting. A period of lower carbohydrate dieting will make you more efficient at using carbs down the line and using fat as a fuel now. These things are true. Now, are they superseding calories? No. But if you're not looking at them, you're leaving results on the table. And I just think people aren't looking deep enough. People aren't driven by the science anymore outside of the gym floor. More people are into mechanics, but not actually about, like, the diet world's become too simple, where people are oversimplifying everything.
That's it. It's oversimplification now. That's the problem. It's gone the complete opposite way. The people who are calling out others for overcomplicating are now doing nothing but oversimplifying. And whilst we hold ourselves to a certain standard, and we try to hold our clients to a certain standard, some people, their promotional material of a 2 to 3 kilo weight drop from bloating only and just using the photos because they're too scared to show what happened on the scale and listing that as transformation. Fair play to that person. Like anyone who drops anything, if that's their goal, like, massive congratulations to you. I'm not knocking that in the slightest. But in terms of, again, what's a mind-blowing, life-changing, life-altering result, that's the difference. That's the difference. So yeah, and kind of changing that internal environment, like adapting to actually being able to use carbs as its intended fuel, rather than most people have an abundance of carbs and a complete lack of activity and movement. Actually forcing your body to adapt, which you'll only feel benefit from. Okay, shit at first, but you'll only feel benefit from. Some people will never experience that because they're doing things way too simply and not actually forcing any sort of adaptation. They're just working within that 10% realm where nothing's really going to change internally, but you might see some cool external changes, which again, I'm not knocking in the slightest. Yeah, man, like I say, like, it is all going a bit too simple and a bit too mindset-y now as well, because I think that's the biggest gap.
I agree with that. I think we are going down a life coach mindset route, and we're no worries. We are going down a mindset life coaching route now, and I just think when we look at that, we almost are forgetting what our job is. Our job is to be coaches. Our job isn't to sort out your mental health, isn't to cure your ADHD, it isn't to solve your marriage problems, it isn't telling you all the benefits of an ice bath. It's to get you stronger, it's to take some body fat off you, it's to put on some tissue, right? Like, while these things have a crossover, I think we've now lost our way in terms of knowing our place. And for all his flaws, Charles Poliquin was a strength coach. You could not describe it in any other way. No. It was what he said. He is what he is on the tin.
100%. Couldn't agree more. Simple as that. Renowned strength coach.
I want to go into a bit, going through some of the things that are the more controversial things that he may have said, and getting your thoughts on them and having a bit of a discussion. So the first one I want to go into is you have to be low carb until you have visible abs.
Yeah, this is the one people probably argue the most, without even really looking at the data, shall we say. We've seen what extended low carb periods can do for people. Done properly, not a pansy ketogenic diet. Done properly, low carb for an extended period of time with strategic refeeds. We've seen what that can do for people. I was amazed. What blew my mind the first time I really put this into practice with a guy who was already 14-15%, and I took him down to 6. And the first refeed that I gave him was just a bowl of oats, banana, and honey. No protein. Do not put protein powder in it. Do not make it protes, or I'm going to kill you on your next training session. Like, I'm going to have you crying. Do not make it a pro bowl. Just oats, banana, honey. And to see the physical, mental, and performance differences in the geezer the next time I saw him blew my mind. To the first part where, again, like, this is where you've got to keep You always got to keep an open mind to every angle that's coming. What's the positives from that, but what's the drawbacks as well? So there was a part of me that was like, well, this is it. It's 100% proven. Need to do this with absolutely everyone. And you don't. Of course you don't. But we look at things like that, and all we're doing, again, an issue with the industry, and I don't want this to turn into just an industry bashing podcast. We've done 50 million of them. But we're kind of just looking at what's happening with bodybuilders as if that's what we need to do with the general population. Forgetting that what is getting someone on stage is not necessarily what I need to do with my client. It's not necessarily what I need to do with my transformation clients either. But there's real merit in there. When I've done proper protein and fat, I mean, if I do that, we'll talk about breakfast in a bit, but if I do that for the first half of the day, or fast for the first half of the day, and then do that, my focus and my productivity and my mood is worlds apart from having carbs all the flipping time. You've probably got way more experience with this than I have.
What as regards to the low carb stuff, like, yeah, I mean, I've done my fair share of it. I've had a number of clients do it. I generally think when it comes to the low carb sort of like, we were going to come back to the boot camp, but low carb in general, when you look at the sort of like the pathways of it, it makes sense. It works. And where I think the downside of this is, because what people are going to say to me, but carbs are your energy source. Okay. So carbs are your energy source, but if you're mega overweight and inflamed, you're not going to be utilizing those carbohydrates very well. If your blood sugar's out of control, you're not going to be utilizing those carbohydrates very well. You need it as an energy source. You've got plenty of energy. Hate to say it, it's on your gut. It's on your love handles.
Yeah, exactly.
So you don't need it. Do you like it? Is it a preference? Do you enjoy it? Sure thing. And I'm not saying everyone's going to go low carb. And I don't go completely low carb here. I go lower carb. I go fairly low carb with beginners, but not mega low. But I think where I kind of have an issue with it from a scientific perspective now is that while I think low carb initially can solve these issues, get people using fat as a fuel source, can help bring down inflammation. Because if you think, bear in mind, right, what's going to bring down inflammation other than a calorie deficit and stress management, things like this? It's going to be having more omega-3 fish oils and fats. It's going to be having some more olive oil. It's going to be these things that are going to be higher in fat anyway. So if you want to make the calories work, the carbs, as a consequence, we're going to have to come down. So the low carb diet is almost by default to get the response you need from an inflammatory perspective, rather than the fact that you absolutely can't have any insulin going in the system whatsoever. But where I do, when you kind of go 3, 4, 5, 6 months low carb, there's going to be a knock-on effect on thyroid. And that's where I sort of draw the line. So I probably will go like 2, 3 months tops of lower carbohydrate dieting before I make a change. But I think Charles was right in the ethos. I just don't think you have to wait until you're sub 10% to need a carb. I think that was an overly simplistic view from Charles. But I think the principles make sense. Does it mean you have to do it? No, of course not. But is it maybe a good approach for some people? Yes. And as we said before, the energy perspectives, people say, well, I need carbs for energy. I'm like, well, your brain can run off ketones, your brain can run off lactate as well, you know, and most of your mental energy isn't from carbohydrates. If anything, they calm the nervous system down and make you sluggish. That's more physical energy. It's more being able to train very, very hard. And that depends on the volume of your workouts. So I think as long as you're managing your workout volume well, I think a low carb diet can work with people. And I think if you do that for a little while, like you said, with the strategic refeeds, like if you deplete someone, I use the analogy of a sponge. I deplete that, like squeeze all the water, or in this case, carbohydrates out of that sponge, the muscle sponge. I'm in a great position to take that in. And then that can fuel performance, and that can fuel filling out glycogen stores and get way more out of it. So I'm not against a low carb diet in the right circumstances. The next one I had then, let's talk about the meat and nuts breakfast.
And just that, like, this is relevant for both bits. It's, again, back to that oversimplification of things at the moment. Just because there's an element of you don't have to do this, we're too quick to go, okay, then I won't. When you might consider at least trying,
Yeah.
because you don't have to, but it could still be beneficial for you. We're so quick, or the industry's so quick to go, well, if you don't have to, then it's irrelevant. Then it's a complete write-off. There's no science behind it. It doesn't mean that. Just doesn't mean for this moment in time for your particular goals, at the rate that you're willing to go at, you don't have to do this. But that doesn't write all merit off of it whatsoever. The meat and nuts breakfast, it's not something I've made clients do. I try to advise my clients to go more of a protein and fat for breakfast and save the carbs for later in the day and do it post-workout. And I think you enjoy it more as well. And we know what it does to blood sugar levels and what it can do to overall energy if you have too many carbs first thing in the morning. And the issue is, I walk around London and I see people with 800 calorie carb heavy breakfasts from coffee shops and things like that. Like, mate, in like an hour, you're going to be reaching for another coffee and something else to eat. You're just going to burn through that through like mental energy alone, through stress. And these are the people who would probably feel a rapid energy and mood lift if they would just switch that and have protein and fats instead. I think it's an amazing thing. Not everyone loves meat and nuts for breakfast. That was the biggest challenge with trying to get people doing this. Not everyone enjoys it. It became a running joke at Mayfair with a few clients. I loved it. I actually really enjoyed it, to the point where I ended up having chicken thighs with with a ton of nuts and spices and a little bit of dried fruit. And then eventually I thought, well, I've dried fruit and my nuts with chocolate as well. I'll put my dark chocolate in there as well. So I had a bag of chicken thighs, dark chocolate, ton of like cinnamon and some I think it was cayenne pepper, nuts, the whole shebang in there. And then I got really lazy with my rucksack. I didn't want to carry lunch boxes because I hated the sound of it banging around. So I just put them all in bags. And at UP Mayfair, it became known as the keto bag. Rob's got his keto bag out first thing in the morning with my 2 chicken thighs and dark chocolate, just chugging it all down my throat. But I loved it. I felt amazing on it.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it and I loved it, and I did for a while make people do it because that's what I was told was the way, and I was like, well, you have to eat the meat and that's breakfast, and here's your 5 meat rotation that you're gonna have. You have lamb on Monday, beef on Tuesday, and whatever else. And yeah, it was a hard sell. And some people I literally overwhelmed and burnt them out the process from day one. But I will tell you this: every single person that did it never regretted it, ever. And in 13 years. And the reason for people who don't know and this or don't understand the idea of the meat and nuts breakfast is that the carbs increase serotonin, make you more sluggish. So going a lower carb, higher fat breakfast was the right fuel for your mind. The reason why we did red meat and nuts is because the combination of red meat and nuts created the right neurotransmitters to fuel optimal mental performance throughout the day. So I played around with this. I went more with like eggs and smoked salmon and things like this with a few nuts and playing around with that sort of stuff. Right now I do, I'll show you this. I do shout out to my coach Ant from Shapeshifters. I do one of these, which is a pea protein shake with tons of like greens, fiber, flax seeds. And I have that with an essential oils product and a fish oil. And that does my meat, my sort of like protein and fats, high fat breakfast. I feel great off it. Digestion's good. All things are good. So I think, is it great for everybody? No, but it's only not great for people who can't get their head around not doing it, or people that are doing high volume training in the morning. Other than that, I feel that most people, especially people who work busy jobs that aren't living and breathing for the gym, switch your oats for a high fat, high protein breakfast. I almost guarantee you will not regret it from how you feel, how you perform, and everything else.
And that's the simplest one in the world, right? Okay, if you don't want to do that 5 meat rotation and end up chicken and turkey one morning and beef or lamb the next, just eggs and salmon makes a world of flipping difference.
Yeah,
really does. So yeah, just have eggs and salmon for your breakfast, or like you've just shown, some sort of protein variant with some extra fat source in there. However you want to get that in, you know.
Yeah. So now we're on to the next one, probably the most slammed one, and this is the one this spurred me on to have this conversation. Biosig. What's your thoughts?
I think those who are willing to do it still with their clients shows a level of care and attention to detail that most aren't ever willing to put in. I think it has some relevance still, but it's a tricky one, right? Because what's backing it up, really, apart from an enormous amount of anecdotal data? Have there really been, like, a genuine question, have there really been studies behind it outside of that field, outside of Poliquin's own field? I don't know that they have.
There are, but not an overwhelming amount. And a lot of it, as you said, is anecdotal. There are coaches that have seen these things. Were you at UP when Christian Maurice came and did the seminar?
No.
So Christian Maurice is another Poliquin, old Poliquin strength. He didn't work for Poliquin, but Poliquin educated. And he works with a lot of Hollywood actors. And he did a seminar where he literally showed, he created all these graphs where he made one change in either doing a big high fat spike, like a refeed on fat, or a refeed on carbs, or a different supplement. And he tracked the changes in individual sites. And this is the thing I may bring it up, because I think I have seen firsthand through changing small things in dieting and supplementations. I've seen it with my own body, with what coach had given me. I've seen it in my clients, and I have seen it in other people's clients enough to go, it is not bogus. There is something in this. I think it's relatively overblown in certain areas. I don't think your lack of growth hormones making someone have a particularly fat knee. Like if I took the growth hormone out of someone, I don't think their knees would get infinitely fatter. But I do think there is a massive thing on cortisol around the midsection. I do think subscap and supra, if you go on a low-carb diet, do come down quicker. And something I learned from my coach, because he's very shit hot on the calipers. He was talking about the mid-axillary and the thyroid. He's like, it's not showing that your thyroid is particularly low, but it could be showing certain deficiencies that could be precursors to thyroid being low. That I've not looked into, but this guy's one of the smartest people I've ever met in my career, and he swears by calipers. And I wonder if an element of this is the slamming this, like we said about people not studying enough on some things. Are people just not good enough at taking them to be precise enough to see the changes that they're actually looking for? So they just write off the method.
100%. How many people, when they first started with us, in terms of coaches, were not good at calipers first, right? We had to teach them. We had to show them. Some had an understanding of how to do it. Some were, a little bit rusty, and some were just completely brand new to it. I was brand new to it. I had to flip it on. And then eventually, I'd like to say I got pretty shit hot at it, but through repetition and consistency. But for anyone who's listening that's not too sure what it was, you took calipers across 12 sites of the body, and it's probably less now with all the updates. And there were hormones linked to each one of those areas that dictated your fat storage. Now, in a large percentage, that's true, that a lot of your fat storage is dictated by your hormones. And there's a big crowd of people out there who took that and ran with it as the only thing that matters. Don't count your calories, don't track your macros, your hormones are what's important. Well, how the fuck do you affect your hormones, bruv, without looking at what calories and macros you're taking in? So, of course, it links back to that. The two work in tandem, hand in hand. One affects the other and vice versa. So it's important to look at, but I think the biggest thing for me is maybe some of those hormones we don't have as much influence over them to make much of an effect, but we know what happens to fellas with high estrogen levels. We know what happens to people with high cortisol levels in terms of where their body fat storage is. That's all been proven. We might not be able to spot reduce as much as some claims have been made, but we know we can work more on certain areas through the right nutrition and the right type of training and sleep, etc. All the things that can, and supplementation that can help us with our hormone balance and see a bit more of a result. But again, because it's a product that got packaged, it's an easy target, right? If Poliquin had only ever come out and said, right, there are certain areas of your body that your fat storage is dictated by your hormones. I don't think anyone would have ever had anything bad to say about it. But because it became a system and therefore a product, it's, again, like I say, it's an easy target for people to snap at. And I think some of the biggest critics are people that never even did it. In which case, I think they're forming their opinion based on secondhand information rather than actually diving in and seeing what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And you were said earlier on about being shit hot with it, right? But like, do you still use the eyeliner pencil?
No, no, I don't do anything.
Do you ever use the eyeliner pencil?
A handful of times.
So we don't know really if our marks were good.
True, true.
And I wouldn't feel 100% confident getting in front of Charles in my measurements, and I teach it to people, and I feel I'm pretty good at it and pretty accurate. So I think that it's the competency of the tool is more the problem than necessarily that it's completely out there. But you're right, as you said, like calories and hormones are interchangeable, and you can't really have one without the other. But I also think it just, at the very least, it offers you another tool to be able to see if something's working and going in the right direction. When weight, or if you get a bit of a recomp or a time of the month, can we check that certain sites are coming down?
Totally.
Can we make sure that subscap, umbilical, and supra, so your love handle, your upper back, and your belly button, are below 10? If you want to get shredded lean, you're going to be wanting to look at those things. So I do think there's more validity in it than people give reference to. And while I see people all the time say you can't spot the juice and Biosig is rubbish, and then they talk about taking your Himbine. Right?
I think I've got some here, actually. Yeah. Yeah, quite right.
So you've got some?
Yeah, I think in one of these drawers I got some. I love it. I love taking it for fast. Again, this is ticking all the anti-fitness industry boxes. Himbine and fasted cardio. I love it. I love doing those two things together.
Yeah, well, we've spoken about fasted cardio before, right? Like, it's one of those things that, it on paper it works, but it just doesn't work as much as people like to say. If you consume too many calories, no, fasted cardio doesn't work, and it's going to give you that 1 or 2%. But from a pathway perspective, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so let's move on to the next one. So we've gone through this, and I think biosignature falls quite nicely into the supplementation. Now, I'll go first on this one because I think with the supplementation with Poliquin, I think it was excessive. I've seen coaches selling 50, 60, 70 boxes of pills. And this is where a lot of the hate for Poliquin has come, because people thinking that he was there just to try and sell people these pills. Having said that, though, like, I've never seen a rationale for a supplement that Charles has given. While maybe a little bit exaggerated, in my opinion, some of them, none of them are inaccurate. And a lot of them work. What's your thoughts?
A lot of them work. Most of my supplementation protocols I use with people now are based on Poliquin principles, really. The high omega-3 doses, zinc and magnesium, high dose together. I saw some amazing things from a client year before, who showed me his blood work after we made no changes to any diet or training apart from obvious progressions, through zinc and magnesium supplementation. It was something he wanted to do, and it was related to a business he's involved with, to do with men's health, down there, which, I won't say yet. No, I won't say yet. But they're great. I'm not saying anything bad there. And they were monitoring his blood work at the same time, and that's the only change that we made. And testosterone went up. I can't remember the exact number, but by quite a big number. And that's what really made me first start looking into zinc and magnesium supplementation for my fellas, being very, very specific with the types of zinc and the magnesium. Whereas before I was like, let's just get whatever, right? As long as it finishes in 8 the chelate finishes is an 8, you'll probably be all right. But it made me dive a little bit deeper into it. The high omega-3s, I've been using that for maybe over a decade with people. But I believe that came from Poliquin when I first heard about it as well. More in terms of joint inflammation and joint pain than anything else. And then later down the line, found there was use and merit for reasons with upper body transformation as well. And okay, you look at the price of his supplements. Okay, you're paying, but I believe the quality is second to none, and the sourcing of these materials is second to none as well. You have to remember the supplement industry is a little bit screwed up. Most of the protein companies in the UK source it from the same farm. So you're getting the same protein from every single person. You're paying for the labelling and the packaging and whatever sponsorship athlete they've got on the go at the time. I don't believe he sourced his stuff from the same place at all. Yeah, man. We could go on a supplementation rabbit hole again. Those are my two big things I took from him was so DIM as well. DIM for females, high omegas for everyone, zinc and magnesium for fellas. Those are my 3 that I still use now with most people when it's needed, when it's relevant.
I think supplements have fallen into the same category, though, of where people bash biosignature. And, people go, oh, supplements aren't worth it. People are just a scam. They're just selling you stuff. And it's, again, people like to bring things down. When you actually look at it, you're putting someone in a calorie deficit. By definition, it is a deficit, which means because you're deficient in calories, you're more likely to be deficient in the vitamins and minerals and nutrients that you need, not because you're not having a good, healthy diet, but because you're not eating enough of them. Add to that the fact that the quality of our food is nowhere near as good as it was 50, 100 years ago with all the things sprayed on them, then we're now in a position where supplementing is more important than ever. People that say supplementing doesn't work are ludicrous. And I think there is definitely a place for supplements. Are they more important than a good diet and exercise? Absolutely not. Are they more than the 5-10% that people say? Absolutely. And I think they are. If you want to get someone mega lean and keep them healthy, I think supplementation becomes very important when you're getting to those lower levels of body fat. And I have seen, going on to what you were talking about, anecdotal stuff with your guy and blood work, I have seen people who have gone 9 grams of fish oil, and I've seen beer guts disappear in less than 2 weeks. Going from massive beer gut to flat stomach. Less than 2 weeks. I have seen people take DIM and resveratrol, and their legs get dramatically leaner within a month. Like quicker than the rest of their body. And you're telling me, sorry, you can't spot reduce. And this isn't 1 or 2 people. These are tens, potentially hundreds of clients that walk through the doors at Shoreditch where I see their legs come down. These are people that I've seen that go through online products, mine and where I've previously worked, get leaner legs. Right? And I will give a shout out here, actually. Shout out to Joe Halstead. UP do the estro control product. It's fantastic.
Second to
none. And that
none.
was formulated by 3 supplements that Charles promoted, and he put them together in the perfect dosages. And it's an excellent product.
It's a revolutionary product, really. And ladies especially, I won't get commission for this. I don't care. In terms of caring for people, and ladies, if you want to alleviate some of your monthly symptoms, but potentially, regulate your cycle a bit more as well, if it is a bit all over the place. My God, why aren't you on it? Why aren't you on it? The stories speak for themselves. Some of the testimonials of that product are mind-blowing. And some people say, yeah, but you can get this stuff from food, but you aren't getting it from food. You can't guarantee you're getting it from food. Because again, the nature, the makeup of our food is so different to how it was. So in which case, why don't we utilize our technologies that we currently have and take it in supplementation form?
So I think we've come to the conclusion that supplements are way better than a lot of the industry likes to say they are. But I want to finish off on one more that gets a lot of slack. And I think we can assume that his training knowledge was unbelievably good, right? If anyone thinks it's not, seriously, you need to spend more time reading his stuff. But the one thing that I think still gets a little bit of hate is the structural balance templates. And in particular, is it 10% of your bench press should be external rotation for 10 reps? What do you think of that?
I knew you was going to say that one. Yeah. So this stuff then goes beyond my capability, because that was the limit I would kind of hit. I personally, I can't say true or not because I haven't got the data, whether researched or anecdotal, to say whether that is the case or not. But when you say it, it's one of those things that kind of makes sense a little bit, which I'm reluctant to say. But I get it, mate. That's where the level I've never been to. I've never reached. I've never been prepared to look at in more detail. So I can't really comment much on it, which is terrible.
Yeah, like I personally, I think I think some of them are bang on the money. I think some of them are a stretch. I have not personally seen. I think I've seen one or two people that can do it. In terms of those prone trap threes and those external rotation readings, and I have made my own versions of these with some different percentages. However, I have spoken to people like Tom Hibbert. I've spoken to people like Carlos who have athletes that go, yep, we have plenty of athletes that do it. So when you're looking at mega strong boys, there potentially is scope.
Yeah.
And that's what I need to learn more about as well.
I mean, you got to look at look at some of the other places that would be relevant. Okay, so is it relevant for 60-70% of the general population? Probably not. Is it relevant for elite powerlifters? Well, yeah, that's worth looking at. And maybe some people are by default doing that without utilising that method to know they are doing that. That's something that needs to be looked in as well. But we don't study it. Well, some places still do, but we don't study this stuff as much. And I think a lot of this stuff is now no longer as relevant because he's no longer with us. So there's only a handful of people still pushing these levels and these boundaries out there, but they're not him. At the same time, mad respect to a lot of people out there, but no one's him who's really willing to go to that next level. But like you say, there's people out there who say this is still relevant. There's efficacy to this. So we can't completely write it off as we don't need to worry. Again, it's one of those things, right? You might not need to do it, but it doesn't mean no one should do it.
And I think when you look at it as well, just as a closing point on this, whether you think the measures are excessive or not with certain things, I think it's really good just to give people a bit of a guidance. If you're never going to hit 10% of your bench press, at least you've got 10% of your bench press as something to continue to work towards, to keep pushing. It gives you a target. When building strength and building tissue is a longer term goal. And I think that is where this comes in. So I think, to conclude, I think on the whole, Charles liked to talk a big game. And I think some of the things may be a bit overblown, but I think he has a legacy in this industry that I think will be hard to ever be replicated. And the guy's methods work. And if you're listening to this now, having gotten into the trend of being popular to bash him, go back and reread, and you may surprise yourself. I'm going to finish off in terms of this with a shout out to somebody else other than me this time. And that's going to be to a guy called Tom Hibbert in Winning Health in Southampton, because he's one of the guys who programs like Charles very well. He's one of the best programmers in the world. And if you want to learn more about this from someone who can, unfortunately, may you rest in peace, Mr. Poliquin, can have a level of training knowledge like his that has been developed and refined over the last, 10 odd years or so, since 7-8 years since he died. Go and look at Tom's work because it's exceptional. And then, Rob, tell us all about where to find you, Fat Loss Fastlane, and your little hint at Alive.
So come find me. The most active platform I'm on, which I'm not being very active on at the moment, is Fat Loss Fastlane on Instagram, where you can also sign up to help me gauge interest for the first Fastlane live event, which I will come up with a better name, where the idea is to be some sort of immersive event in terms of it's not just me talking at you for a couple of hours. We're actually working on something. Working on belief systems, and then putting that into practice through a workout. That's the plan of it. I'm going to come up with a better elevator pitch than that as well. But this is all very, very early doors. And the weirdest thing is the idea literally came to me in a dream. So I have to act on it because I have to.
Love it. Right. Thank you as always, man. I will speak to you next week.